questions we wrestle with as Christians about who God is, how do we live out our faith, what is the Bible, what is the truth of the Bible, what are we supposed to believe, how are we supposed to live. There are really big, deep questions that we ask each other, that we ask God, that we wrestle with ourselves. And that's why the Cultivate podcast exists, to help us go deeper in our understanding of who God is, His Word, and the way that He's called us to live. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cultivate podcast through the Grove Church. I am Charlie Loften, the lead pastor there. We have with us
Abigail Boone.
Abigail Boone.
I'm trying to go with that one now.
Yeah. I like that.
Well, hey, I want to interject right here, though.
Stop.
So, quick backstory to the listeners. I was at a basketball game seeing Charlie's favorite team, the Hogs.
Go Hogs.
And I heard the announcer, and I texted Charlie, and I said, can you do that announcer voice? And he just texted back 100%.
Yeah.
So, let's put it to the test. Intro the podcast.
Welcome to the Cultivate podcast with the Grove Church. I'm Charlie Loften, the lead pastor there, and we have with us the one, the only, Abigail Boone.
That was pretty good.
That's pretty good.
I'll accept it.
I mean, it was great. It's like, in order for me to really do it well,
You'd have to be super loud.
I got to be loud.
Yeah, that's fair.
I got to be loud, and that just didn't feel.
I wish they would do a zoom shot on the guy who's doing it, just so I could see
He's
what
like-
he looks like when he's doing it.
Welcome to Bud Walton Arena,
See, you got to get up this. You got to get up that loud to be able to do it.
And then they do
the basketball palace of Mid-America.
Is that what they say?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Mid-America.
it's too loud for a podcast.
That's hilarious. All right, well, thanks for doing
A
that.
gentle podcast like ours.
Oh, we're a gentle podcast.
Yes. So we have Abigail Boone with us,
Thanks for doing
creative
that.
director, podcast coordinator, and I haven't introduced you as an expert in a while, but since based on today's topic, sin expert,
Yeah, I really reveled in that.
Abigail Boone. Thanks for joining us. So, as people who've been listening, we've been working our way, I don't want to say slowly, I'll say methodically.
Okay, that's probably a better way to put it.
Systematic theology.
Yeah.
And we've worked our way through theology proper, through bibliology. What else have we covered?
Angelology, anthropology,
and then we've just done a lot of
Q&As.
A lot of Q&As.
Oh yeah.
We just finished up a whole bunch of Q&As.
Q&Aology.
Yes.
That was hard to.
That was it. And now, really kind of building on, if we go back to our last non-Q&A episode, we spent some time talking about the fall of humanity under anthropology. And that builds a bridge to the next topic, which is one of your new favorite words.
Yeah.
Which is?
Hamartiology.
That was close enough. That was
What did I get wrong?
That was. I feel like you're kind of swallowing it. It's Hamartiology.
Hamartiology.
There's only one R.
Hamartiology.
Yeah, I could tell you're kind of like swallowing some of the syllables in there because you're hamartiology. Okay, maybe.
It's a thick word.
So the study of sin
Yes.
is what we're talking about. Hamartiology comes from, so it's logos, the study of hamartia, which is
sin.
the Greek word for sin.
Okay.
Okay. And so what does the Bible say about sin? We're spending time talking about what is sin, what does the Bible say about sin? Everybody's favorite topic, original sin. Are we born sinners? What are the consequences of sin? So we'll spend some time all over that. And I can only imagine. It's funny. I step into this, I start prepping for
what questions
the
I'm
next
gonna knock.
section. I'm like, this is going to have a lot of questions.
Yes.
Well,
It seems pretty. I mean, it's not that all of the other topics haven't been talked about throughout the whole Bible, but this one really seems like it's all over the Bible.
It's a primary theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just start with a question to you then, in anticipation of Q&As later. So, Abigail, what is sin?
Missing the target.
Oh, come on.
That's sin is, I would think, anything that is going against God's intended design for humans. Can I get a ooh?
Ooh, that's really good.
Was it good?
But now you're just talking to a bro. If you're talking to a bro.
A bro. Probably things that are probably not good. and don't lead to good things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you said bro, but I would probably say this to a bro. I would say probably things that stunt human flourishing.
Okay. Well, where did that feels like you got that from somewhere very specific. Where does that idea come from?
I don't know where it came from, but I definitely heard a talk, I guess, at some point that mentioned human flourishing, and it just made sense in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That if you look at the Garden of Eden, everything is flourishing and human flourishing, and there's nothing standing in the way of human flourishing the way that God would create it. And then the fall just stunted flourishing in every way that you could imagine, and that was the entrance of sin.
All right, so when your youngest niece turns 3 and she comes up with that, like, Abigail, I heard this word. What does she call you? What do you think she's going to call? I guess she's not really talking well
They
enough.
used to call me Abba, all of them, but it slowly transitions to Abigail, and then Abigail, and then Abigail.
Oh, okay, just kind of works this
So
way.
the youngest 2 are on Abigail right now.
So how would you explain to a kid, little kid, what is sin?
Things that God said not to do.
Okay, all right.
That's pretty concise.
Yeah. That's because the interesting thing is, I ask you what sin is, and you gave me your best. I've heard people give talks on this answer.
Missing the mark.
Yeah. And then you gave a big answer. And then you broke it down a little bit, and really, it's not that any of those things are the right answer or any of them were wrong. It's just one of those things where it's like we all know what it means. Oh, sin, right? Yeah, for sure. Like sin is a word that doesn't need to be defined. What is sin? I mean, like
bad things.
Sin is sin.
But right? I hesitate to just say bad things because sin isn't necessarily. Like suffering isn't just like tried and true sin. Like there might just be like hard seasons that come from a world of sin, but it's not like you sinned and so you're suffering. Yeah, like someone died, now you're suffering. That's sin. That's not true.
Yeah, I mean, again, not everything that is bad is sin.
Right. But you could say that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's really, when you say like bad things, like doing a bad thing.
Yeah, that's sin.
That's sin.
Yeah.
But that doesn't even incorporate all of what sin is. And so it really is kind of hard to give what feels like a thorough and complete answer without, sounding like a tool bag.
Yeah, which I did.
Oh, no.
Human flourishing.
No, that was really good.
Okay.
That was really good. I liked it. But it's interesting. We'll start with your tongue-in-cheek answer about missing the mark.
Okay.
Do you know why people use that phrase a lot?
Isn't it an archery thing?
Yeah.
Like it's actually a part of the archery game.
Yeah, so the primary Hebrew word that is translated sin is hata, and then the primary Greek word is the one we've been talking about,
Hamartiology.
And they take off theology. Yeah, but both of those have the idea of trying to do something and missing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that it's necessarily per se an archery term, but it is.
It became an
It
archery
is a term that is used in archery, which is to miss your target.
So you can say falling short.
Yeah. So that it really is a play on words of sorts when Paul says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
All have sinned and have sinned with respect to the glory of God. Right. I mean, so it has an idea of like, I was trying to hit something. And so that's what makes that verse so good, because it then answers the question, if sin is missing a target, what is the target? And so he makes it very explicit. If you say, everyone has sinned, it's like everyone has missed the target.
Missed what target?
What target? And fallen short of the glory of God.
Yeah.
And so the two primary words that are used in the Old Testament and the New Testament both have that implication of missing a target. Also, a lot of the words that get translated sin or get used to describe that really can be described as unrighteous or lawless, those kinds of things where they really are more legal terms. So it's not necessarily missing a target. It is a law breaking.
Yeah.
So what is sin? Sin is having a target and missing it. Sin is having a set of rules or guidelines or laws to follow and
Breaking
not
it.
doing that.
Yeah.
And so I would say 90+% of when the Bible talks about sin is talking about that. There is an ideal of laws, of rules, of who you're supposed to be. And in one way or another, you are failing to hit that target.
Mm-hmm.
You are not living up to what you're supposed to. You are not following the law. But here's the thing that I think where we can get a little, I feel like we can get a little incomplete because most of the time when people talk about sins, like name me 3 sins,
Mm-hmm.
right? People are going to talk about explicit bad things that
Right.
you do.
Yeah.
But it's more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Well, it's also just your state of being.
A state of being. What do you mean?
Well, this is getting into the sticky waters, but we're born into a sinful world. It's like you can't breathe without hitting sin. So it's like baby's first breath. Shoot, there it is.
Okay, so you're so we're okay. We'll
That gets way too into it, but it just feels
we'll
like
come to that. We'll put a pin in that and come back
Right.
into it in the
but
next
it
episode.
just feels like it's your natural posture is going to be sinful because that is what has been passed down.
Yeah, so there's a heart to it
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not necessarily doing anything if I am sitting here thinking jealous thoughts.
Right, but it's
not overtly doing something.
right.
And so that's a heart sin. That's an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's an internal thing. But then there's also the bad things that we do. But then there's also, I don't know why it's always a little old lady that needs to cross the street.
Oh.
It's always a little old lady. But and then you don't, or you're like you
a sore after the gym girl. It's too sore to walk.
yeah, or somebody has they've spilled something out on the floor in front of you, and you walk past them. Someone spills their favorite homemade chili, the one thing that they are the best at, and they spill the chili all over the office carpet. What do?
I would be like, oop, I didn't see that. Walk out.
And so you ready for another little clever thing that pastor preacher types say?
Yeah.
Well, there's sins of commission.
And you're going to say omission.
Sins of omission.
I couldn't tell you what that means, but I have heard it before.
And there are sins of
permission.
Disposition.
Oh.
So things that you overtly do,
okay.
Commission. Things that you fail to do that you should do, omission. And then there's what's going on in your heart.
Disposition.
Your disposition.
Interesting.
Do you wish, we'll just get off target here for a little bit. Do you wish that we rhymed more or did more
alliterations?
More alliterations or things like that? Do you wish we did more of that?
It does actually help me remember things.
So will you remember that? If
Yeah.
I ask you next episode, will you be able to drop?
Yeah, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That tracks in my mind.
Okay. So we've already mentioned a few of them. Do you know of any others kind of key verses that kind of help us understand what sin is?
What sin is? Oh, I should probably, other than Romans 6:23.
Which is?
The wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord.
It's a good one. We'll come back more to that one in the third episode on sin, where we talk about consequences.
I don't know a specific verse of it. Well, before that, I know that First John talks about living in the light, and it talks about you being a sinner, and there's darkness too, and that's kind of another way the Bible talks about it. But then also Ephesians talks a lot about what we have been saved from. I know somewhere in the Old Testament, Moses reads out commandments.
There you go. There's a list of them somewhere.
Somewhere in the Bible.
Yeah, so I think one really good important verse is when you kind of danced around there in First John, where he's talking about, he talks a lot about love, but he also talks
Mhm.
a lot about sin. And in 1 John 3, verse 4, he says, everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness.
I nailed it.
You did. And so you put that together, that sin is lawlessness, and then go back to, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You kind of put those two ideas together, that sin is lawlessness and that we fall short of the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
The idea there is, well, then what is the target that we're trying to hit? And what determines something being or not being sin, whether it's something that you're doing or failing to do or an attitude that you have in your heart, is a standard that God sets.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're sitting here on a Christian podcast. Whoa.
Sorry, I just thought of another one. Romans 7 and 8. Because that's where he's like, oh, what a wretched man am I. I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. And that's talking about sin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Got it. I don't know if you've ever snapped before. And I know it may seem like, of course, to be sitting here in a systematic theology Christian podcast through a church and say it is God that sets the standard.
Right.
But at the same time, I think if we are going to fully define it, there is, fallen short of the glory of God.
Are you going to define glory?
You want to define glory?
Not me.
What do you?
I've never understood what it is. The only thing in my mind is like the halo that's around God.
Okay, keep going. What do you mean?
He has an
like
aura.
Like you're not wanting to say aura because it feels new agey.
An aura of goodness and holiness and greatness around him. And I mean, I wouldn't imagine that's what we're shooting for, because we are like God, but we cannot be God. But I guess we would.
So you're not trying to fall. You're not falling short of being God, because that's more than just sin. It's
maybe
like
being
not
acceptable
being smart
around.
Enough.
Is it like being acceptable to be around that goodness?
Okay, yeah. So this is one of my least favorite things in the world.
Okay.
Which is I come into a room of normal people, and I weird the room by being in there.
Does that happen often?
Where you just like, just me coming in. Oh, everybody watch your language. Everybody watch your language. Pastor's here. Or, you walk into a room.
Does it offend you more that I don't treat you like that?
Someone's holding a beer.
And
gotta
hide it.
And I okay, so I hate everything about that. So don't please don't please
but
don't.
That's
please don't
a
do it.
similar.
Please don't ever do that to me. But
do I do that to you?
No, don't ever. But even in that, in the ridiculousness of that, there's a picture of it somehow where it's like, I know that this behavior, I believe in this moment that this behavior is offensive in some way, is not worthy of
offensive
this person.
Is good.
Right? I would never speak that way with a baby in the room. I would never do that if my kids were in here with me. This sense of which, where if I were around such innocence, pureness, goodness, I feel like I must behave a certain way in order to be worthy of them.
Yeah.
Right. To honor them. And so you see something so beautiful and glorious and pure, you're just like, you should. There's a standard that you feel like you need to live up to.
So is that the target?
But the standard then is determined by the one who is the glorious one. What does I say? I'm just a person, so don't think of me in that way as different than a person. If you shouldn't do it in front of me, then you shouldn't do it in front of any person.
Right.
I'm just a person. The fact that you feel like you need to check your language or check what you're drinking says more about what you think about language and drinking than what it says about me. But anyways, God is the one that determines. And so he has a greater sense of his worth and value. And so if you want this, if you want to be in my presence, there is a standard that you have to hit. which
Is
in the
intimidating?
do what?
It's intimidating.
Well, in the story in Isaiah, when he kind of gets called up into the presence of God, and it says that there's this is a real misty room, which is really interesting because you can't see God. So God says, if you see me, you die. So all the instances where people, it seems like they have some sort of interaction with God, it's veiled in some way.
Yeah.
But even what he could see was overwhelming to him.
So would you
and he's
say,
like, I'm not worthy to be here. I shouldn't be in his presence. I am unclean. Get me out of here. And then that really weird story. The angel takes a piece of coal out of a fire and puts it on his tongue and says, well, okay, now you've been cleansed. It's okay for you to be here now. So whatever that is
the glory
that Isaiah felt in that moment. Right, he's experiencing firsthand, literally, the glory of God, but even in a veiled way, a super righteous dude like Isaiah still. I mean, he was devastated. I shouldn't be here, and so that is falling short of the glory of God based on what I do, what I don't do, and who I am.
That's a relatable thing. It's like you go to a wedding that's black tie and you're like, I should not be here.
Yep.
But you don't fit the occasion. You know that you're not appropriate for the occasion.
Right. And again, there's ways that you talk at work. There's ways that you talk at home. There's ways that you talk with your friends. There's ways that you talk to your parents. There's ways that you talk around children. And there is a way to behave, to live, if you want to be worthy of God. And anything that falls short of that
is sin.
And so rather than leaving it up to our own devices, because sometimes our instincts are good, sometimes our instincts are bad. Sometimes, we think, oh, it's no big deal. And it's like, no, that is a big deal. It's like, oh, this is a big deal. It's like, well, it's not a big deal. God tells us, he makes it very explicit for us by telling us. I mean, that's what a lot of scripture is telling us, okay, if you want to hit that standard, this is what you need to do these things, not do these things, and have this sort of attitude.
Was sin like a word that they came up with like a while after Adam and Eve? Because surely they didn't like eat the apple and go like, shoot, I sinned. You know? It's like kind of asking
I would say this is more of a theological question and less of a theological anthropology question and more just a general anthropology question, like how do you invent the first language?
Right. Because so they would have just literally understood it in the concept of like we did something to offend being in the presence of God. What
language did they speak? And I mean, essentially, like you're born an adult.
That would be.
They
weird.
were born adults. Like what had God kind of imputed into them? Levels of knowledge that adults should have.
Well, surely.
Surely.
Like they knew how to use the restroom and stuff.
Teach him how to walk, right?
Right.
And so was language a part of that?
You would hope.
And if so, how extensive?
Right.
And how many were? I mean, it seems like there was a point in which Adam is naming animals. We're off topic.
I know we are. But it is interesting.
It is interesting.
But I was just thinking that the way we're describing sin right now makes a lot more sense than just using the word sin. But that concept of it was there all along. We just gave it a name later on.
Yeah, and sometimes people will talk about it that there really isn't such a thing as cold. There really isn't such a thing as dark. Those are just ways that we describe the absence of something. And
now we're getting really meta.
Yeah, and so these are very common preachery Facebook blog post kind of things where it's like, and there is some truth and understanding to that there is what God has called us to, and then there's not that. Yeah. Whether or not they had a unique word for that at that point, I don't know. But there is the concept. There is what God has told us to do, and then there is failing to do that.
And they felt it immediately.
They felt it immediately. Something immediately happened and changed when they did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so up until that point, they had done nothing that was outside of that. They did not have any particular internal characteristics that were preventing that. And there was just for them one rule.
Mm-hmm.
Don't eat that.
Mm-hmm.
But once they did that, a very specific act of commission.
That's
Right.
what I was just about to say.
You look like maybe you weren't trying to say. I'm trying to put you on the spot. And immediately it says what happened to them.
They felt shame.
They felt shame. So then
covered them.
immediately
They felt it.
something happened in here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did something I wasn't supposed to, and then I immediately feel the distance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to cover myself. I need to hide.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing that Isaiah is feeling. I should not be seeing this.
Right.
They no longer felt worthy, even though God wasn't walking around like he had been doing. They didn't even feel worthy of being in this place anymore.
Mm-hmm.
because of sin. They had for the first time failed to hit the mark.
Right.
And so there really, I guess I can't say there was, and the law hadn't come yet. There was a law, but there was just one law,
Mm-hmm.
and then they broke it. And then over time throughout the Old Testament, God begins to enumerate, okay, well, this is, if you want to not fall short,
Mm-hmm.
this is what it looks like. And this is a little bit off the topic of this. This is really more in maybe a biblical theology. Or maybe we're talking a little about the law. Maybe we can get into this a little bit when we're talking about soteriology,
Okay.
which is salvation. But I do not think that the law was given, and Paul makes this pretty clear, the law was not given to show you how you could attain.
But it showed you how much you're lacking.
It showed you that you can't attain,
Mm-hmm.
which was then, as Paul said, was meant to be as a tutor, a guidepost, a trail leader of a steward, someone to point you to your need.
Mm-hmm.
It was meant there to expose the problem.
Stuff.
Okay, you want to be perfect? This is what you need to do. And you read the list and you're like
there's no
I had
way.
already done like 100 of these even before I saw the list.
Right.
So this means I'm already falling short. So now
Yeah.
what?
Will you, just for the sake of, there might be some listeners that don't know what that jargon word all encapsulates, but when you say law, you're talking about everything that was written in the Old Testament, or you're
Well, in the broadest sense of the word law, it is just a rule established by an authority.
Mm-hmm.
So Adam and Eve had a law,
right?
which was don't eat from that tree.
Mm-hmm.
That was that they had a law. And then in the Old Testament, in the time of Moses, he was given what they referred to as the capital L law,
Mm-hmm.
which were the rules and regulations that were meant to govern the Jewish people,
Mm-hmm.
which we've talked about this before, which kind of fall into three categories: a moral code, a worshiping code, and then kind of a legal
Mm-hmm.
code, that the way that we govern ourselves. And the moral code is designed to show us how we fall short. And then the religious and the legal code are like, how do we deal with the fact that everybody all the time is
Mm-hmm.
falling short?
Yeah.
And big picture, then, all of that was given to show to the Jewish people and ultimately anybody who comes across it, the standard is impossible, and you fail even before you know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the remedies that are given kind of put you back into good legal standing religiously and legal standing with the community, but they don't really do anything about the core problem,
Right.
which is sin is prevalent in what I do, but it even feels like it is prevalent in who I am,
Mm-hmm.
which was meant then to point us to Jesus, which Christology it's next. And
Oh, really?
soteriology and salvation is then after that.
Okay.
But this actually makes a really good segue to what is next, which is what does that mean that it feels like sin is
within me?
It almost feels characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like it is a part. It's not like I am a good person who sometimes does bad things, or I'm an innocent person who fell into bad things.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there is something corrupted about who I am.
Right.
And
you're like naturally bent towards.
Yeah, like I have a bent.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question then is something that philosophers like to talk about. You know, I mean, are we born good? Are we born innocent? Are we born bad? And you know, sometimes people that we really don't like really hit the we're born evil, we're born sinners kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a world now, if someone I don't like says something, I am necessarily must take the opposite position. So we'll spend some time next episode just kind of talking about what is that? What does the Bible really say about am I, quote, in my nature, am I a sinner?
Right. Without even like acting on something.
Right. Am I someone who's not a sinner who sometimes sin, or is there something characteristic about me or people, not just me, but just people in general, that makes us, quote, sinners? And so in that, we'll talk about, you know, original sin, sin nature, imputed sin, all these kinds of things. We'll dance around it a little bit, just enough for you to be able to generate
a lot of
20
questions.
good questions.
Okay.
But we just kind of we want to start here with make sure we understand the basic concept before we get into the big, deeper theological questions about it. And at its core, then, sin is anything that falls short of being worthy of the presence of God.
I like that definition.
Okay. And so there's things that we can do overtly that are bad, that would make us feel unworthy, that would make us unworthy. There are good things that we should do that we don't, that would make us unworthy. And then there's just generalized attitudes and heart things that we could have, which would make those things. What are the three rhyming words?
Omission, disposition, and what's the first letter?
C.
Commission.
There we go.
Heyo.
And so put in that. So lawlessness, being unworthy of the glory of God, things that we do, don't do, or just generalized attitude. That is kind of what is considered sin. And so now we'll move from that to that is what sin is, to trying to ask and answer the question, is sin part of our nature or not?
Right.
All right. You ready for that?
Yeah.
I know you are. I hope you're ready for it too. And as always, thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoyed our kind of stepping one foot into the pool of kind of what sin is and trying to understand it. Because again, we're going to be building a case here for what sin is, how serious it is, what its consequences are, which will then lead us right into Jesus and the gospel and what our needs are. So appreciate you joining us. Encourage you to come back, join us next week as we talk about original sin, sin nature, all those things. And again, if you would be interested in knowing more about our church or any way that we can help and serve you, please go to thegrovechurch.org/connect. We would love to help you, answer any questions, serve you in any way that we can. And again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Cultivate podcast. Our hope is that you are taking steps to go deeper in your faith, that you are asking big questions and you're looking for answers. We hope that we can be a resource for you through our podcast and any other way that we can help you. You can find all our episodes anywhere that you can find podcasts, including YouTube. And again, thank you so much for joining us.